am very happy to be here, and I think it's really nice that I get to talk about the tech revolution currently happening in China, because I think China is usually not on the agenda at conferences like this. Am I right? Yeah. And obviously because Chinese companies are not playing a big role, but this is changing very rapidly. So actually, Chinese companies are now frontrunners in new digital business models and in the implementation of AI technologies. If that's true, why don't we hear more about it? You could wonder. And I believe the reason is that a lot of what's happening in China right now is happening in Chinese, in China. So what does it have to do with us, right? But I am telling you that it's changing really, really quickly, because right now the most successful tech companies in China are going global. Some of them you might have heard of, others are sneaking into our mobile phones. They are gradually building a presence in Europe and in the United States despite the tech war. So it's moving really, really fast. I have been following China's development closely for the past 15 years as a journalist, as a business journalist. I started working in China as a correspondent, so I've been living there, following the development very closely, as I said. And one of the things that has struck me, having followed the expansion of Chinese companies going global, the tech development in general, I have done radio shows, I've done TV programs, I have written 3 books about China over the past 15 years. And one of the things that really strikes me is that we tend to underestimate China and Chinese companies. For good reason, because so far we know China as a copycat nation, and we also know that it's a one-party state, right? You have this Communist Party leading the country, and if you look at this photo, will you believe that China is a leader in new digital business models? If you look at the phones there, I don't know what you're thinking. But actually, this picture was taken at a New Year's speech, like a State of the Union speech that China's President Xi Jinping did last year. And actually, we don't know much about China's leaders and what they are up to, except from what's in their 5-year economic development plans. So all the netizens of China will zoom into the photo like, oh, what kind of books is on the shelf, etc. And do you know what books is on the shelf at the president's office? Actually, there were 4 books about AI, artificial intelligence. And this is very interesting. So people started speculating what's going on. Is this really on top of the agenda? And it is. I'll get back to that because China has a very, very ambitious plan when it comes to AI technologies. This system is getting less democratic. That's also important for my talk here today. You have to keep in mind this is the 2nd largest economy in the world, soon to overtake the American economy. It's not democratic, and it's getting less democratic right now. You see that on all the video streams you might have seen on Twitter or in the television. People are on the streets of Hong Kong right now because they are protesting. They are not happy with the Chinese system trying to control the life in Hong Kong, which is very different, right? So since he took office in 2012, it became less democratic, more control of the citizens, more censorship, more surveillance. At the same time, what do you say if I tell you that the most important driver for the tech revolution, for the innovation happening right now in China, is actually the state? Is that a surprise? If you take the educational system into account, which is very disciplined, and the one-party state, the hierarchy, the control of the citizen, is this the recipe for innovation? At least not in our minds here in Europe. We believe that innovation is coming from below and you have to think out of the box. What if I told you that those very clear plans with a lot of money and a lot of power and a lot of resources behind them actually make the brains and the hands and the money move in the same direction, and it actually works? There are also a lot of things that are not working, but I will not pay much attention to them today because I think you are aware of some of the problems in China and you know it's a copycat nation, etc. I would like to share with you some of the things you don't hear about that are more surprising. Some of it is pretty scary. Some of the use cases in China are pretty scary. That's why I call my presentation Extreme Digitalization in China. But some of them might be inspirational as well. 2 or 3 years ago, I noticed that China suddenly became a leader in these areas. Actually, a lot of the new technologies that are currently shaping our future. And it was a surprise to me as a journalist, having met the ugly face of the regime, surveillance, censorship, human rights violations. How can a country like this become a leader in social media platforms? You don't have freedom of speech. But actually, you see more sophisticated platforms than anything we know in Europe or the United States. We just don't hear much about them. I'll give you some examples of that. I think you're all aware of e-commerce in China is really big. You've heard of Alibaba, right? Yeah. And Alibaba sits on 60% of e-commerce in China. They are bigger than eBay and Amazon combined. So it's huge company. And I think many of you have heard of the company, but we tend to believe that Alibaba is just big because there are many Chinese people, right? Many customers, so of course it's a big company. But the point is they are actually more advanced in the use of AI and big data than their competitors that you know more of. And actually, I don't know if you've heard, but Alibaba Cloud is actually the fastest growing cloud company in the world. Of course, from a low level, because they are just big in China right now, but China is actually a very, very big market. And I think it's 1 or 2 years ago they established themselves in Europe, and I've been looking after European clients, but I haven't found any yet. Maybe you know some. But no matter what, I think they are following in the footsteps of their Chinese clients, right? So they are supporting Chinese companies going to Europe. But this is just the first step. It's obvious that they will move into more areas as they build their presence here, right? I put a question mark on AI. That's because China is only leading in the actual implementation of technologies, but of course not when it comes to research and development yet. I wrote this book that was published in September in Danish, and then it just came out in English 3 weeks ago. And the point of the book is actually we have a blind spot. When we look for inspiration and new knowledge in the digital transformation, we tend to look towards Silicon Valley, towards Google, Amazon, Facebook, Netflix. But I believe we risk missing a really important development in China. So we have to keep an eye on the development there. When you look at these high-speed trains, for me, this is like a symbol of China's tech revolution in a way. Because who would have thought 15 years ago that they could actually export made in China high-speed trains, and that people in other countries would actually use them and not feel scared about their lives, right? And this really happened in 15 years. So China built more high-speed railroad networks than the rest of the world combined. So obviously they have a lot of experience. But where did they get this technology from? From Japan, from Germany, and they probably stole some of it. They copied technologies. They maybe even hacked to get the technology that they wanted. That's a fact that's happened. But it doesn't change the fact that they are now technology frontrunners in high-speed trains. Chinese companies are still copying a lot. And I would like to explain just very briefly, if you've ever wondered why are Chinese companies known as copycats? Why they're not even shy about copying. They just take things and take them apart and try to build the same, right? Why do they do that? Actually, it's deeply rooted in the culture that this is a way to learn. You copy the master. So if you want to be really, really good at something, you find the world leaders and you try to do like them. When you reach their level, you can build beyond, on top of that. And that's why what I'm telling you today is not that China is making groundbreaking innovation and going all new ways that nobody has ever been before, but they are extremely strong in execution. They're extremely strong in taking existing technologies and applying them in the real world in a really large scale at a really fast pace. I'll give you some examples of that. Another factor, of course, the state is an important driver because they have these strategic, very, very strong goals that makes it extremely attractive to invest in specific strategic sectors. But of course, the biggest market in the world also drives a lot of the development. So maybe you're not aware, but China is the largest digital economy in the world with 800 million internet users. And what is special about it is that 95% of the internet users are using internet on their mobile phones. So many people don't even have a computer, and they will probably never get a computer. This is their digital life. So that makes it extremely interesting to do online to offline integration, and that's why China is actually leading in that field now. I will also give you some examples of how they are doing that. How many of you know WeChat already? Are you using it, or you just pay attention to it? How many use it? So, you have lived in China, then you have to use it, right? Otherwise you cannot make your life work very well. Yeah. It's basically like an operating system for modern life in China. So if you need to call a cab, you need to order some food, you need to communicate with your friends or colleagues or customers, it all happens in WeChat. And actually Chinese people spend up to 3 hours a day on average in this one app. And actually it's much more than an app. It started out like a copy of WhatsApp, just like basic messaging, right? But it evolved, and this is important because I think most of us think since China has blocked Facebook, Google, Twitter, all blocked in China, you can't use it, right? So we tend to think that they only have these copycat platforms, and the only reason WeChat has 1 billion users is because they don't have competition from Facebook and Google, etc. But this is actually not true. It was true in the beginning. It was like a very nice environment to grow the business because you didn't have the competition from Facebook and other players. But what we didn't expect, or what I didn't expect to see, was that it evolved into a new creature that the world has not seen before, like a super app, like a lifestyle app covering basically every aspect of your digital life. So one of the really interesting things is that they actually built their own app store. And this was a big surprise to Apple, because I think many people, when they buy an iPhone, I mean, the iOS, it's really, I mean, that is a selling point, right? Suddenly you have WeChat launching something called mini programs. So mini programs is like a sub-app, like a quickly loading app. So now, for example, Tesla, IKEA, other big foreign brands, instead of making Chinese people or Chinese customers use their app, they will just build a mini program. So they are inside this ecosystem of WeChat, which makes it much easier to share things with other customers and talk about the products, talk about their experiences, because in the WeChat universe, everything you see can be clicked on and can be bought. So when Mark Zuckerberg launched the shopping feature in Instagram, it was like big news in international media, right? Wow, really something new. But those who have lived in China or used WeChat will know this happened several years ago in WeChat. And Mark Zuckerberg actually admitted openly, I think it was 5 weeks ago or something, that he wished that he would have started copying features from WeChat universe before. So recently, he also launched the payment option in WhatsApp. That's another copy of WeChat universe. So I think now when we know the Chinese companies as copycats, it's kind of interesting that in this area it's going the other way around now. More and more platforms in our part of the world start paying attention to what's going on in WeChat. WeChat is owned by Tencent, which is the largest gaming company in the world, and I believe that's a big part of their success. It's extremely entertaining, and the user experience is just fantastic. So you just want to be there. You just want to discover things, experience things, and they don't depend on advertisements. That is what Mark Zuckerberg is really jealous about, because YouTube, Facebook, it's all about ads, right? Here, it's all about social networks, people sharing things, people recommending things. And that is really, really strong. That's a global trend that you would like to buy something from someone who who can recommend it, someone you trust, right? I would like to give you an example of one of the mini programs that has kind of disrupted Apple a little bit in China. And now you've probably seen that Huawei has some issues with their operating system now where they can't use Android anymore. So Huawei is working on launching their own operating system called Hongmeng, and I think they will start shipping it in October. I just tweeted that today when I saw that news. But actually, you could wonder, do we need Android? What do we need? We just need a Chinese smartphone, and we need to download, in a way, WeChat, and then you have everything you need, at least in China. And China is the largest smartphone market in the world. So it kind of matters how you're doing there. So this is an example of a very successful mini program that was built in the WeChat universe. And it has challenged Starbucks a lot. And I think that's why this is interesting for everybody. I think Starbucks are very well, they are very successful because their business model is the same all over the world. And we like, because if I order a flat white, I get exactly the kind of flat white that I know from Copenhagen or Amsterdam or even Shanghai. It's the same, right? I pay, I get my ticket, I go to the other end, and I get my coffee, right? But in China, in the big cities where you have the urban coffee drinking culture as you have any place in the world, people would like to order a coffee online. They order everything online because it's humid outside, it's really, the traffic is horrible, it's really crowded everywhere, or you live on the 40th floor, you work on the 40th floor, whatever reason, you would like to pay somebody to deliver the stuff for you, right? So they would like to deliver they would like to order their Starbucks online, but Starbucks doesn't deliver such, offer such service, and they didn't really listen to their customers' needs in China. So there was a local company called Coffeebox who made a platform in WeChat, and they said, okay, you can order the coffee and we will deliver to you. And it will cost you 5 renminbi, right, which is less than €1 to order the coffee, and we will deliver for you. So they went down in Starbucks and bought the coffee and delivered. So then after building a huge base of a lot of coffee lovers in China, they launched their own coffee brand called Coffeebox. And they said from today you have to pay 10 renminbi in order to get the Starbucks delivery. If you want to try this new Chinese coffee brand, you can pay 5 renminbi. So a lot of people started using the new coffee. So I think this is interesting. It's an interesting example of something going viral really, really quick because people share it. And in the mini program in WeChat, what Coffeebox did was not only to create a lot of buzz about this new coffee brand, they actually invited all their users to build their own coffee store. So in the front, the back end is the same. It's a online coffee shop. But the users can build their own front so they can sell coffee to their friends. And then if I'm really successful and really popular and I sell a lot of coffee to my friends, I can earn points to buy my own coffee. And you might be wondering, why would anybody try to sell coffee to their friends if they can afford to buy a coffee for like €4? Why would you bother? Because it's fun. Because it's a game. So if I'm really, really good at it, I will get access to the secret products that other people cannot sell in their coffee shop. So in that way, the gamification is really strong, and I think it can be inspirational to other web stores. No matter what kind of product you sell, it's quite interesting. For example, for me as a China hand, I could have a China bookstore on a large e-bookstore on the internet, right? And I could recommend what kind of books I could sell to my friends. I wouldn't do it to earn money on my friends, but I would do it because I would like to share and I would like to have a dialogue with people. So this is about user engagement, and it's very, very viral. Actually, 1 million people built their own coffee shop in 24 hours when they launched it inside mini program in WeChat. So for Starbucks, this is a bit of a headache, and they don't really know what to do about it. Of course, Starbucks is online. They have an online presence, and when you buy your coffee, you can earn loyalty points, etc., like you know from other retailers in your country, of course. But they have to figure out how do we deal with this, because just 3 weeks ago there was another coffee brand that was just noted on the Nasdaq stock exchange in New York, Nasdaq, which is a technology stock exchange. It's called Luckin Coffee, and it's another digital-born coffee brand in China, and they want to surpass Starbucks by the number of shops this year. So they are moving extremely fast, and I think they will be successful. Right now, they are just burning cash, so they are paying a lot of money to promote their products and to build their presence and open all these physical stores and online presence. But Starbucks has a challenge here because they are not strong enough. So they actually did a partnership with Alibaba now, and they are trying to figure out new ways of selling online and offline. And I believe China is so important. I mean, you have so little people drinking coffee in China, but you can just see what is happening with the urbanization. More and more people will drink coffee. So they need to win this battle. It's like the biggest market in the future, right? So it has become a must-win battle, and that's why China has also started functioning like a explorium. So Starbucks is testing new things, new digital ways of selling to their customers. And I believe that many of the new products and services and business models that will evolve from this competitive market, we will actually see in Amsterdam or Copenhagen in a few years. We are just several years behind this development. And why is that? That's actually because Chinese people are the consumers are extremely curious to test new technologies, to try new products. They will line up for hours just to try a new, candy or whatever. They are curious consumers. And that's really nice for those who want to attract them to try new things. And they are less reluctant to give their data if they really think it's smart what they get in return. This is an example of what's going on in the online to offline integration. I think in Europe we call it omni-channel, right? In China they call it O2O. And the thing is, they are probably 5 years ahead of what's going on in Europe. In Europe we have something called GDPR, which is a good thing, I believe. I'll get back to that. But in China they don't have it. And right now, you just see all kind of new concepts and tracking of people offline and online. And this is a small shop that I visited in Hangzhou near Alibaba's headquarters, actually. And the thing is, I think you all know that Amazon took over a bricks and mortar supermarket chain in the US, right? When this happened, it was like big news. The online giants will destroy the physical space. They will just buy everything and control everything, right? But actually this development started 3 years before in China. So Alibaba already started buying the electronic retailers, super malls, all the big retailers several years ago. So if you want to know what happens when the online giants go offline, you should look at what's happening in China. And what's happening is that they are revolutionizing the way we are shopping by using new technologies. And right now you can say that most of the big chains are either with Tencent, which has WeChat and WeChat Pay, or with Alibaba, which has Alipay, the payment app, which is probably the biggest bank in the world with 700 million users, right? So when you use Alipay, you can use your face as a payment option. They call it pay with a smile, but you don't really have to smile as long as you get your face scanned. And this is not widely spread yet, but it is starting to, they promote it a lot in many kinds of shops. You don't have to bring your wallet, you don't have to bring your phone, you can actually just use your face. So if you enter a store where they already know your face because they're cooperating with Alibaba, or maybe they're partly owned by Alibaba, it means they now see it's not just Christina who is entering this store, like a lady who's probably around 40, she likes bright colors. No, it's actually Christina Boutrup, who loves noodles and works in that and that building, lives in that and that area. They basically know everything about you. This little shop is not like a big famous brand, and I'm sure when they have this face scanner, and they also had a body scanner, I don't think they know who I am when I enter the store. But there are many startups in China offering services that can connect the dots, so to speak. So you have a person entering the shop. I can click on different outfits that I think would be suitable, and I can get a little beautified, and then if I choose to buy something with my WeChat Pay or Alipay account, they will get my name, or with my Visa card, whatever I, as a foreigner, would use, and then they could try to connect that with with the other things they know about you. And that means that they can push the products to you online that you have been looking at in a physical store, or they start building the puzzle. And there are basically no limits. They don't have to ask you what you think about this. They just do that. And that's the crazy part of it, and also the scary part of it. So in our name tags here in this conference, we all have a QR code, right? And we start seeing that many, many places. It's actually like a comeback for us, right? I mean, we kind of, we had that 10 years ago. We didn't really believe in it. Now everybody has a smartphone and we can scan things. And in China, it's huge. They scan everything, even on big buildings or on a body like this. So I believe that we will see more and more. And if you want to know creative ways to use QR codes or to integrate online to offline, you should definitely look at what's going on in China. There are so many examples. The last things I would like to talk about is China's ambitious AI plan. As I mentioned, China's government has a target, a goal, and that is China will be the leader, the global leader in AI in 2030. How many of you believe this can be doable? You are convinced, quite convinced? I believe so too. That's because I've seen how they how they set their target for many years and how they reach them. The reason why they can reach it is because they have so many ways to motivate the investments. For example, if you want to build a robotics factory in China, or you want to do something with artificial intelligence, you can get subsidized, you can get tax breaks, you can get a free piece of land if you want to build a factory, you can get a PhD, you can have a really, really attractive contract if you are like returning from overseas. And one thing you should be aware of is who is leading this tech revolution. It's not people who are just educated in the Chinese system. These are people, brains coming back from Google, Microsoft, Amazon, Facebook. So most of the AI startups, people that I met in China, have a background in those companies. And they return to China, they see a good chance to build something, and then they start working. So one of the reasons why it's taking off so quickly is, of course, that you don't have legal barriers, you don't have ethical dilemmas. You might be wondering, that's why I'm bringing this photo with all the workers. Why would China make such a big bet on AI? They have so many people. Yes, China has 1.4 billion people, but it's not enough. They lack people. They lack doctors. They lack teachers. They lack so many people in certain areas. They even lack factory workers in some areas. Nobody wants to work in a factory if they can afford not to. So you have the same kind of demography as we know in Europe, and the same kind of challenges. They need to automate. They need robots in their healthcare system, in their schools, everywhere. That's why they believe this is the only way China can keep growing. That's why the government makes such a big bet. One of the things they are doing, for example, is JD.com is number 2 in e-commerce, and they have actually been testing drone deliveries for the past 2 years in 3 different provinces in China. And when they tested the drone delivery in Sichuan province in the west of China, they had a lot of complaints because more than 100 flights were cancelled. People got really, really angry about it. So they complained to the local authorities, and the local authorities made some very specific regulation. You can fly in these areas, you have to fly at certain times, etc. So this is very typical for China's development, that you test, you let the technologies loose, and then you adjust. Then you make the regulation. And this environment can be really, really great if you are a company that wants to test new things and try new things, but it can also be a big headache. You never know when you do something illegal. Actually, you can build a whole company, a whole technology, based on a certain situation in the legal environment, and tomorrow it's all illegal. It means you have to start all over and find out how you want to survive. So this has been the environment for Chinese companies for the past 40 years. So all the companies in China are in a way born agile. They are forced into this very dynamic, ever-changing, regulatory, scary place. You never know when. You have some opportunities because you have all the gray zones, but you also have a lot of headache because you need to adjust all the time to the market, to the customers, but also to the government and the regulation. So Chinese companies, that is one of the things which is probably related to the way you work. You are used to developing new things, and you have a test period, or you have like a beta version. I think this is normal in your industry, but this is totally, in every industry in China, this is how they work. You cannot risk being late to the market. You have to be the first mover. So you would rather take the chance to make a mistake or to launch a product that has mistakes in it and get some criticism for that, because you are very, very focused on listening to your customers, adjusting, and then you launch a new version. And we are not talking 1 year later or half a year later. We are talking maybe 1 week or 2 weeks after. And when you ask the companies, but how can you work that fast? How can you build a technology in 6 weeks? And they're like, can you see the mattresses on the floor? We don't sleep. We just work all the time. I heard earlier today someone talking about a 40-hour working week. It's not enough. But do you know how much they work in Chinese tech companies? 996, which meaning 9 to 9, 6 days a week, and some of them 7 days a week. And actually they start falling dead. I mean, people faint and they die. And this is not a healthy environment, but it's the reality. It's a really, really tough battle there. And the competition is so fierce because you have this huge market. You can grow an app from 0 to 300 million users in just 3 years if you make it right. So the changes that can create, not just for you and your family, but for your whole extended family, is amazing. And that's what's driving a lot of the development. One of the things that you see applied everywhere is facial recognition. It's in schools, you just scan your face and tell the teacher you are there. It's in factories, you scan your face so you came to work. But also now testing in Shanghai's subway system. You can use your voice within 5 meters in a noisy environment. And this is Alibaba's technology. It can still recognize your voice within 5 meters. And also you can use your face to buy the ticket. And if you ask Chinese people, why would you let the authorities know exactly which part of the train you're in? Like you are totally, you're totally trackable, right? Why do you want to make it so obvious where you are and let them surveil you? And they say, can you imagine how many people are in the subway of Shanghai? It's the largest subway in the world. You have 24 million people there. I've tried it many times, and you actually sometimes get hurt because the doors just keep opening, and more people will get in. It's very, very unpleasant. So you would do anything to make it more convenient and to get out of there as quick as possible. And also you have to keep in mind that Chinese people are used to being surveilled. Since the Communist Party took power in 1949, they had a little book noting what kind of political ideas people had, etc. So they know everything about their citizens already. Now, about the big tech companies, they also force them to make data centers in China. That's why if Google wants to be in China or Facebook wants to be in the Chinese market, they are welcome. They just need to let the server be in China so that the government can always access the data and see what's going on and eventually block or censor things, right? But of course, these companies are very reluctant to do that. But this is how it is in China, and it's causing a big headache for some of the big tech companies when they go global, because when they're in China, they have to obey the rules, they have to work closely with the government. As soon as they go outside, they're like, we don't know the Communist Party, we are just a private company, right? So this is a big dilemma, and I can't tell you how it will end. We just see right now that we have like a trade war with US. I'm sure it's a tech war. It's not a trade war. It's because you have this tectonic shift where China is actually challenging the United States and their companies in very, very specific and very important areas. So this battle will not stop tomorrow or next week if Donald Trump and Xi Jinping make a deal in Japan. It's going to last a long, long time. So this last example is from a public toilet in Beijing. And if you want a piece of toilet paper, you need to scan your face. And that is quite funny, right? And you might be wondering, what if I need more than the 60 centimeters I get? Then you have to wait 10 minutes and you can get another 60 centimeters. The reason why I bring you this example is because can you imagine what happens when you use the high tech this way? They do it to actually prevent theft of toilet paper. And they say we actually save a lot of money because people can't steal our toilet paper anymore, and we make sure there is toilet paper for our citizens and tourists. But the scale, can you imagine how many public toilets they have in China? Can you imagine how cheap the technologies will be? That is the big, big factor that you have to pay attention to, that China is so, so big. And as the last point, this is a crowded swimming pool in Sichuan province, and you cannot imagine taking a swim there, right? But the reason why I bring this photo is because you have to imagine the companies that I'm talking about, they are born in this environment. So as soon as you have a good idea, or a good concept, or a good business model, you will have thousands of copycat competitors. And it means it's like a gladiator battle. They use sometimes illegal methods to get away with their competitors. They will make shitstorms online about your products. They can do anything to take you down, right? So sometimes, very often, the environment, this sea gets so crowded that they need to go global. They need to go to other markets because even the biggest market in the world gets too crowded. And that's when you will meet them somewhere, maybe as your competitors or maybe as your potential partners. Because I would like to suggest that you think about China in a new way. Actually, you could see it as an explorium. You could think, I have this crazy idea I would love to do, but we can't do it in Europe. It's illegal. I mean, you can't just take a lot of data and you can't just build something like this. What if you went to China and did it there in cooperation with a local university, for example? Is that unethical? Well, maybe it is, but we have also been buying stuff from their factories for the last 40 years, and they also didn't have maternity leave and overtime payments. This is actually taking advantage, make their competitive advantage your advantage in a way. So I'm suggesting that you look at the opportunities in China as well. And then another important note, I mentioned the GDPR. Some companies in Europe say, oh, we have so many limitations, that's why development is so slow. But can you imagine some of the things happening in China? It's going so fast. They forget people. They forget people's feelings. How do we feel about working together with robots? How do we feel about using machines for so many things in our lives? It's just happening, and they don't take their time to talk about it or to feel. So eventually, I'm sure they will have so many questions and so many dilemmas that they are facing. And who has the answers? Europe. So that's why I'm very optimistic on behalf of our companies. But I also think you should remember that GDPR, the Sustainable Development Goals, being good as a company, doing good as a company, this is the DNA of European companies. It's not in China. It's a different battle and a different game. So they would love to cooperate with companies who can make sure that they kind of go into this more data ethic agenda, which is all over the world now. And even the Chinese government just launched ethical code of conduct. And it's not that they really care about it, because they just want development right now. They want to create jobs. They just want to have the economy keep growing. But the reason why they do it is because the big tech companies demand it. They are, of course, afraid of this sentiment in Europe and other places, and they know it can be a limitation to their expansion if they don't try to understand and obey those rules. So on that happy note, thank you very much for listening.